If market power is concentrated in the hands of a single man, that man becomes as privileged as a king. Today I will tell you one of the rules of this. We have often heard the name of the Rockefeller family in conspiracy theories. But who was the head of this dynasty, John Rockefeller, really? Was he the bravest figure in the history of trade, or a commercial dictator who blocked competition, set oil prices as he wished, and bought politicians? Let me tell you what happened, and you decide the rest. The story you are about to hear is not just about big fish swallowing small fish, but about big fish devouring other big fish as well. At the center of this story stands John Davison Rockefeller, one of the richest people of all time. He was born into a poor farming family with 8 siblings. What could a child born into poverty have done to become the richest man in the world? Because of his family's financial difficulties, Rockefeller had to leave high school and start working. At the age of 16, he began as an assistant bookkeeper at a produce commission company. 4 years passed. He was now 20 years old and believed he had gained enough experience. Together with a partner, he founded his own commission company. At first they traded wheat, salt, and pork, but a substance called oil would become the turning point of his life. At that time, the value of oil was not fully understood. It was seen as an insignificant resource. Think about it. Motor vehicles had not yet been invented, and ships used coal as fuel. What many people saw as nothing more than mud, Rockefeller would see as black gold. He foresaw that oil would one day turn into an industry. In those years, people used whale oil in lamps for lighting. Paraffin or kerosene, in other words, distilled from petroleum, was very expensive. Moreover, because it could suddenly flare up, it was dangerous enough to burn down wooden houses in accidents. For this reason, petroleum was not preferred for lighting. Instead, a special oil taken from whales was used. But due to excessive hunting, the number of whales had dropped dramatically. Ships were now going out to sea for years without returning, searching the open oceans for whales. Whales were gradually disappearing. With the technology of that time, extracting oil was also extremely difficult. It was largely a matter of luck. You could drill for meters and find nothing, and the entire investment could be wasted. Would Rockefeller ever leave his business to chance? He clearly saw the costs and risks of oil extraction. Without extracting a single drop of oil himself, he chose instead to buy crude oil from thousands of producers and, together with a partner, focus on the refining side of the business, processing crude oil into more usable petroleum products. And there he found what he was looking for. Through very fine distillation of oil, kerosene was obtained. When it was sufficiently homogeneous, it no longer flared up suddenly while burning. Lamps could now burn safely and consistently. This period marked the beginning of oil's first true commercial value, with kerosene, known popularly as gas. However, by the late 1860s, the oil industry faced a problem of overproduction. Refineries were being built everywhere. In order to make money, refineries constantly cut prices. As oil prices fell further and further, a destructive competitive environment emerged. Rockefeller wanted a definitive solution to this problem. He needed to bring other refineries under control, but for that he needed a lot of money. With financial support from financiers, he founded a company whose name said it all: Standard Oil. Since it was a joint stock company, it could sell shares to increase capital. Within 2 years, the company's capital grew from $1 million to $3.5 million. Rockefeller raised enormous amounts of cash by selling shares. With this new flow of money, Standard Oil began buying up smaller refineries. After some time, Rockefeller also bought out his partner's shares, and became the largest shareholder of Standard Oil. The plan was ready. Using the refineries he had acquired, Rockefeller began cutting oil prices, even at the cost of losses. He threatened larger refineries with destruction through price wars. Either you joined Standard Oil, or you were crushed. Rockefeller described trying to fight competitors as boxing with a ghost. In just 4 months, he bought 22 of the 26 refineries in Cleveland. These events caused serious reactions, even in the 1870s, despite the lack of commercial ethics laws, and became known as the Cleveland Massacre. Soon, those who resisted competition gave up and were forced to submit to Standard Oil. Anyone who tried to challenge Rockefeller's oil empire got their share of the consequences. Standard Oil became the first major trust in the history of capitalism. Trusts were the giants of the capitalist world, and Standard Oil had now become a petroleum trust. From then on, it alone determined prices. By weakening competitors, it made them dependent on itself. Rockefeller ruled the sector with such fear that mothers frightened their children by saying, "If you don't behave, Rockefeller will come and take you." Oil was completely in his hands, but transportation costs were at least as important as production costs. Rockefeller attracted the attention of Cornelius Vanderbilt, the railroad tycoon who had spread railroads across America like a spider's web. Rockefeller knew that if he controlled transportation, no one could bring him down. In exchange for special transportation agreements, he promised to fill Vanderbilt's railroad lines with oil. As gas lamps spread, American streets and homes were brightly lit and whales were saved. But eventually, Rockefeller had more oil than Vanderbilt could carry. Railroads had to work with his competitors as well. Rockefeller played 2 railroad tycoons against each other for years, forcing them into rivalry and pushing transportation fees down. This situation did not please Tom Scott, president of the Pennsylvania Railroad. He confronted Rockefeller, but Rockefeller had grown even bolder. When railroads refused to carry his oil and demanded excessively high prices, this became an open declaration of war. Rockefeller was cornered and began to think deeply. One day, while watching how pipes carried oil from one point to another, he had a moment of clarity. Pipelines, that was the solution. He built interstate pipeline networks. Now railroads could do whatever they wanted. He no longer needed them. He laid more than 4,000 kilometers of pipelines. This move devastated railroad companies. Its impact was so severe that 1/3 of the country's 360 railroad companies were wiped out. Rockefeller grew even stronger. Despite Standard Oil handling 2/3 of all transported oil, railroad executives vowed to destroy him. Empire Transportation Company, owned by Scott and others, aimed to defeat Rockefeller by building new refineries and their own pipelines. They tried to turn oil producers against him. Rockefeller retaliated ruthlessly. He shut down all refineries connected to the Pennsylvania Railroad, even at the cost of massive losses, starving the railroad of oil. This cost him millions, but in the end, he won. Within 3 months, the Pennsylvania Railroad lost $10 million in revenue. Thousands of workers were laid off and wages were cut. Workers revolted, triggering the Pennsylvania Railroad strike. The damage was so severe that the railroad collapsed. Scott was defeated and had no choice but to surrender. Empire Transportation Company offered to sell all its assets to Rockefeller. Rockefeller went to the bankers and raised $3 million in cash within 24 hours and bought the company. By 1877, Rockefeller controlled more than 90% of the American oil market. He was now the world's greatest oil power and the most powerful man in the United States, not even 40 years old. Just when everything seemed perfect, something unexpected happened. In 1879, Thomas Edison invented the electric light bulb. J.P. Morgan financed Edison, and together they founded Edison Electric Power Company. The use of electric bulbs in homes was now only a matter of time. This invention threatened the end of gas lamps and Rockefeller's kerosene business. Would Rockefeller allow the light bulb to ruin him? Of course not. He immediately launched anti-electricity propaganda, frightening the public with claims about the dangers of electricity. While desperately trying to stop electricity from entering homes, he once again landed on his feet. Gasoline-powered engines were invented. Henry Ford introduced the mass-produced automobile. Oil suddenly gained enormous importance once again. Rockefeller had backed the right horse. The world needed oil. As coal lost its dominance as an energy source, Rockefeller's wealth grew even more. In 1896, presidential elections were held in the United States. One candidate, William Jennings Bryan, argued that the American economy had turned into one dominated by trusts that swallowed small businesses. He promised to fight monopolies and unfair competition. This was what the public wanted. He vowed to break the trusts of Morgan, Rockefeller, and Carnegie. How could he succeed against the world's richest and most powerful men? He had one hidden weapon. He was an extraordinary orator. But the three powerful men did not sit idle. They united and devised a plan. They believed there was nothing money could not buy. They supported Bryan's rival, William McKinley, donating $20 million to his campaign, one of the most expensive in American history. Bryan toured the country endlessly, giving over 500 speeches, but he was defeated by the power of money. McKinley became the 25th President of the United States. The 1896 election showed how easily money and power could buy elections, but not everyone could be bought. McKinley's Vice President, Theodore Roosevelt, would prove that. In 1901, after McKinley was assassinated, Roosevelt became president at the age of 42. He was a man of character and could not be bought. Without fear, he activated antitrust laws. The Supreme Court supported him. Laws were enforced to prevent monopolization, price fixing, and secret agreements that restricted trade. Roosevelt first targeted Morgan's Railroad Trust, Northern Securities. The government won the case, and the company was broken up. Next came Standard Oil, which had become a state within a state. Lawsuits were filed one after another against Rockefeller's company. Rockefeller claimed that what the government called a monopoly was simply an efficient enterprise. But Roosevelt was well prepared. A 14,495-page report was prepared on Standard Oil, and 444 witnesses were heard. In the end, the court ruled in favor of the government and ordered the dissolution of Standard Oil. The company was given 6 months to disband. Standard Oil was broken into 34 separate companies. From these emerged giants we know today, such as Exxon, Mobil, Chevron, BP's American branch, Conoco, and Amoco. Rockefeller owned